Greetings and konnichiwa, and welcome to the Onyx Tavern. I'm your host, Rick the Barkeep, bringing you episode 167 here at the tavern, presented by HeroTaku.com. Now, do you recall the scene in Turbo a Power Rangers movie where Larigo comes to Earth and he becomes lost in the African savannah, and of course the Rangers have to go look for him? Well, who do they send to go looking for Larigo in Africa? Well, they send Tommy. He's the leader of the team, so heck, it kind of makes sense, send the leader after him. But they'd send Catherine along with him, which I always thought was an odd choice because, yeah, she's his girlfriend and all that, and there's that scene where he has to go after her to save her because he loves her and everything. Um, but it always struck me as odd is that you bring somebody whose special talents, outside of being a Power Ranger, is diving and being a ballerina. Right? Of course, that's something she picks up later in Turbo. Nevertheless, I always found it as odd because, if we're going to Africa, wouldn't it be nice if we had a character who has lived in Africa, knows about the animals, and knows her way around? We don't have a character like that in Zeo, do we? Oh, wait, we did. Her name was Tanya, the Yellow Ranger. The funniest thing about Power Rangers, in terms of Zeo and Turbo, is that they completely forgot that Tanya was from Africa. It's how we're introduced to her in the series. It plays a kind of a major part of what happens to Aisha. But once we get past the Zeo beginning and get into the entire series, outside of finding her parents on Mysterio Island, it never comes up at all in the series. It's not mentioned again in Zeo. It's never brought up in Turbo. It's just something that they don't talk about. And today, I really want to go ahead and talk about the character of Tanya and how they gave her this unique setup, but really chose to do absolutely nothing with it in the series. And it just boggles my mind that they would do that with this particular character. So first of all, let me talk about Tanya as a character overall. In the great history of Power Rangers, if somebody was to write a book about Power Rangers, Tanya would be mentioned, but she doesn't take up... I mean, she's not as significant as characters like Tommy or Jason, and I would also argue she's probably not as significant as some other Yellow Rangers that we have either before or after her. She's just kind of there, honestly. I like her better than Aisha. I thought she had a little bit more personality. But we don't really do anything interesting with her in the series. I mean, throughout 2 seasons, throughout Zeo and Turbo, what exactly does Tanya do? Well, she has a boyfriend named Sean. She becomes a radio DJ, and she wants to be a singer. That's about it. I mean, I didn't go into this watching every episode of Zeo to refresh myself about Tanya, but that's all I remember about her in the series. Those were the things that she was interested in, and that she chose a replacement ranger whom she had never met. Yeah, think about that for a second. Tanya chose Ashley to replace her, but the two had never actually spoken with each other prior to that. Kind of odd, isn't it? So Tanya, she's just kind of there, kind of whatever. I mean, I don't hate her, but I don't dislike her, but I also don't like her. She's kind of like in the gray right there. Just like, she's a Power Ranger. Okay, good for her. She's a Power Ranger. That's about it. But again, she has an interesting origin. So the series, Hog Day Afternoon Parts 1 and 2 establish that when Aisha goes to Africa looking for the Zeo subcrystal, that she runs into this girl named Tanya. Now, you think she's actually a native girl here, but as the dialogue suggests, she's only been there for about 3 years, as her parents had gone missing looking for Auric the Conqueror. That's, that ties into the backstory that we get later on in Zeo. So she's been in Africa for about 3 years. Aisha, the brilliant mind trust that she is, decides, you know what, I used to work at a veterinary clinic for, maybe a summer and all that, and all these wild African animals are sick. I'm going to stay here in Africa and take care of these animals, while at the same time sending Tanya, this girl who's lost her parents, only known this most of her life, and send her back to the future, rapidly age her back into a teenager, and have her try to acclimate to Southern California life. This is great. Just to get on the thing about Aisha, Aisha's like extremely selfish in this choice, because she tries to do something which she really has no business doing at all. If Aisha was like a doctor or something, I could go ahead and see it. It also kind of screws over her family. If you actually listen to Zordon's dialogue, it says that because she's now in Africa, that her family will be moving to Africa, which I honestly don't know too much about Africa to be quite honest, full disclosure here. But I wouldn't like it if I just had to up and move one day from Southern California to the savannah in Africa. Just because my daughter, thinks she can cure animals. It just, the whole time travel thing makes absolutely no sense at all. But even if it made the slightest bit of sense, basically Aisha deciding to stay in Africa to take care of these animals is extremely selfish, especially when you consider that she's also a Power Ranger, and you're basically taking somebody who's experienced. She's been there 2 seasons, so 2 years of battle experience, as it were. You're getting rid of somebody who's a veteran, who knows what they're doing, to send this inexperienced person who has to go through these entire life changing ordeal kind of thing once she gets back to the future to go against the Machine Empire, who they don't even know is coming yet, but restore the time. It's just like, it's so selfish on Aisha's part to do this, to basically say, screw everybody else, I'm going to stay here in Africa and take care of these animals. I just don't get it. And again, what happens to Tanya here? Because I want to point something out here. Now, we know that by Turbo, Tanya graduates high school, and she graduates as a class of 1997. So let's say she's about 17 years old at the time that she graduates from high school. Now, according to the Rovang timeline, which is really the best timeline we have on Power Ranger events, when Tanya becomes orphaned and stays in the village in Africa, that takes place sometime between August of 1986 and June of 1987. Or it's estimated around that point because she'd have to be around that particular age. But sometime in the mid to late 80s. So let's assume that this takes place somewhere in the tail end of 1986, just to say. That means that Tanya would have been about 6 or 7 years old about the time that her parents had disappeared. And that she would have been, 9, 10 years old at the time that Aisha shows up to the African village. And then, when we actually do the time shift, the time change, she goes back to Angel Grove, and she skips forward, to be 17 years old. She's, or 16 years old, so that's 6 year jump into the future. In which, we know that the rest of the world doesn't remember what's going on. Bulk and Skull make that clear. They don't have any memories of this alternate timeline. But Tanya does have memories of the alternate timeline. So basically you take somebody who's, a 9, 10-year-old girl and put her in the body of a 16-year-old girl. I mean, wasn't this the plot to like Big and 13 going on 30? What wasn't this the main plot, that you put a prepubescent child into an adult's body and something bad typically happens, either through comedy or what have you and all that? Why does Tanya get to remember all these memories but doesn't remember her childhood? That's 6 years of her life that she doesn't get back, that she isn't going to go ahead and remember. So that's kind of messed up to begin with Tanya's character. Then, once we get into the first episode of ZL after the beginning, the whole setup at the start is where Tommy and Kat are talking with Tanya, and her whole thing is, I just feel like the new girl in town. Which is the understatement of the series, considering that not only are you on a different continent, living in a different culture of people, but you've lost several years of your life, and you're about to go into high school. Which, again, I don't know what the educational system is there, but it doesn't seem like she had a good one where she was living. So you expect her to be in high school, and she's able to graduate by 1997, when she was last in the second grade with formal education, I'm going to go ahead and take a guess at? It seems like they want to set this up, like, they want to have the Zeo subcrystal search. They want to send them to these unique and exotic locations. And then, for whatever reason, they got Karen Ashley out of the show. She wanted to leave. She was fired, whatever it is. I'm not exactly sure. And then they decided, okay, wherever we're going to send her, we're going to bring somebody back. And I guess because, Karen Ashley is black, they thought Senator Africa would be a good idea because it has to lock on to their heritage. I don't know if that's racist or not. You guys be the judge on that. But then they get another black girl to go ahead and replace her. I don't know. It's just like you got rid of Aisha, who really wasn't interesting of a character before, and you get Tanya, who's not that interesting of a character, because once you actually get her into the series, we don't do anything interesting with her. I mean, you would imagine that we would have that fish out of water story, that we would have an acclimating period, that the first episode she's in there, living in Angel Grove and doing everything, she would not understand certain customs and cultures. She wouldn't understand technology and all that. Granted, the series indicates that she was only orphaned for about 3 years. But where was she living before? Obviously, she was living someplace where they speak English, but is it safe to assume she was living in the United States, or could she have been living in, say, South Africa or someplace where they do speak English? We don't know. That's never established with her character. But we don't have that moment of complete culture shock. We don't have it where she goes from one extreme to the other. And again, in the first scene of the first episode where she is back, she already has herself a boyfriend. She's already dating this Sean guy after being at Angel Grove High for maybe a couple days, a week at most. I don't know. And that seems kind of odd because you established it, and in the first episodes of Zio, she's still wearing her tribal gear and everything. It's the first costume that Tanya is wearing in the series. So again, I'm not understanding the disconnect here. Why did you introduce the character with these African roots, but not do anything with the character at all? And of course, there's the episode where she's using computers. I'm sorry. If she was in second grade when she first used computers and everything, she's probably a bit confused on what this whole internet and gaming thing is that's going on. I don't know. It's just like they wanted to have this character with these roots, but not do anything with her at all. To just say, oh, she's in Africa. And again, the only time this does come into play later is in the lore of Auric episode when we find out and catch up to her parents, who did not play a significant part. There was never that, oh, I'm going to find my parents one day. I just know they're out there. There's never that thing going on, which, they could have done that. That could have been an interesting subplot for her searching for her parents, particularly since she has the technology of the power chamber at her disposal to look for them, but whatever. And then after she finds her parents, it's never brought up again. We never see her parents. They're never mentioned whatsoever. It's not something that people discuss in the series. So what was the point? And again, how do we get to Turbo and we go to Africa and you forget, oh my goodness, this is an African child who could possibly be of help here. She stays in the power chamber with Adam doing absolutely nothing. I don't get it. How did you forget that in less than a year's time between the conception of the character and to her first theatrical appearance? I mean, I actually went onto the Wikipedia page for Turbo Power Rangers movie, and I had to point out that she's an African orphan. That's not actually written on the description of her character on the Wikipedia page. I had to go write that in there because nobody else had done it. So I find that completely odd that, why'd they go to Africa in the show anyway? You could have gone anywhere in Turbo Power Rangers movie, but you chose Africa for a specific reason. What was that reason? Because you would think from Writing 101, have an African character, we're going to Africa in the movie, therefore we're going to bring her along. Maybe reunited with Aisha or something, maybe Aisha's village finds her or something, maybe that was in the original draft or something. Who knows? But it's kind of like saying, it's kind of like having a character who's born and raised in New York their whole life. They move away, they live in Texas, and then the characters have to go to New York for some reason, but don't bring the New York guy with them from Texas to help find what they're finding or what they're looking for or something. It's just baffling to me that that's something that happened. So, the whole thing about Tanya is I just don't understand her character. It goes against everything that she's established to be. Because if you watch the episodes of where she's introduced, say you only watched the Zeo Beginning Part 2, and then you skipped forward to the first season of, or to the first half of Turbo, which is Yellow Turbo Ranger, those two characters are not the same at all. They're not completely related. And I don't get that. Because it really does seem like they were replacing Aisha with Aisha, because it seems like maybe what they were doing was that they were giving her what they were going to give Aisha. Maybe Aisha wanted to be a singer, or she wanted to be a radio DJ or something like that, and then at the last minute they had to change it because Karen Ashley was leaving the series. It just doesn't make any sense to me. And the only thing I can really find about the history and conception of this character is that her original name was Kenya, which is a little on the nose if you ask me, but whatever. Um, yeah, so Tanya is nothing really significant or special within the history of Power Rangers. I just thought it was interesting to bring up the whole idea that they do nothing with her, that her character is completely contradictory to the way that she's set up in the series, and it's just really, really a bother, I think. But I want to know what you guys think. What do you think of the character of Tanya? Do you like her? Do you dislike her? Do you not care like I do? And what do you think about the whole African background heritage thing? Is it significant? Is it important, you think? What does it mean in the grand scheme of things? Because also, let's point out that when you actually look at the ZL roster, let's just point out Red Ranger is Native American, Green Ranger is Korean, Blue Ranger has Mexican descent, Pink Ranger is Australian, and Yellow Ranger is African, and of course the Gold Ranger is alien and then American later in the series. So I would argue that they are probably the most international team of Rangers in terms of ethnicity in Power Rangers Zeo, but again, never brought up in the series. Much like Rocky's Mexican ancestry, that's never brought up in the series at all. Or the fact that Kat is Australian outside of season 3. Oh well, that's all I have for you guys regarding this. Leave a comment below, let me know what you think about Tanya, and until next time, the tavern is now closed.